to you from the territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, also known as North Vancouver. I am a mom of 3 wonderful young men, and I have a wonderful, supportive husband. I am my 3 children. My 2 children were diagnosed. My first child was, Corey, are you here? Because I can stop talking. Yay!
I'm here. Sorry, I got pulled into a breakover for some reason. I don't know why.
It's all good. I'll finish my story later. Corey, over to you.
Okay. Sure. Sorry, I thought we were at 1:30. That's totally my bad. My apologies. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Corey Walker. I'm an autistic self-advocate from Prince George, BC, and one of the facilitators for the late diagnosis panel discussion. I want to acknowledge that Prince George is on the traditional unceded territory of the Cals2022 First Nations. Like everyone else on this panel, I wasn't diagnosed until I was autistic until I was an adult. However, I was probably diagnosed a little earlier than some of the other people on this panel. I received my diagnosis of what was then called Asperger syndrome in 2001 when I went to a neuropsychiatrist at UBC in Vancouver. I was struggling. I've known for some time I was attention deficit, was struggling with my concentration and focus, and I was, in university, upper division, and needing some help with my ADHD. And the irony is, so I was working towards my BA in English and History, and they referred me to a neuropsychiatrist that was supposed to help. Ironically, I never got any help with the ADHD, which I went there for, but came out with this diagnosis of Asperger syndrome, something at the time I'd never heard of. I had no idea what it was. So my mom and I went to the web and, probably even Google back then, and did some searching and found that Asperger's was a form of autism. The more we read about autism, the more light bulbs went off. I began to understand why I played with my pillowcase, why I clapped my hands, and why I rocked so hard as a baby that I went through 3 mattresses in my crib. I don't remember that. That's coming from my mom, because obviously I don't remember that. But it all started to make sense. I didn't know it at the time, but that diagnosis changed my life. Initially, I seldom talked about my diagnosis until November 2006, when I was studying to become a high school teacher in Terrace, BC, an external program run by one of the Lower Mainland universities. I made an unfiltered comment to the classroom teacher. It wasn't a swear word. I basically said teachers without prep blocks have no business taking on teachers. So basically the teacher didn't want me in the classroom anymore. They couldn't find another placement for me, so the program was kind of ready to wash their hands of me. I started realizing I need to figure out this autism thing, and I started disclosing it more and learning more about it. And then, in 2012, I got a job at Autism BC. This is a bunch of years later, and I was there for 7.5 years, and later ended up working for 3 other autism organizations after that. And now I do a lot of motivational speaking and everything because of it. So that diagnosis changed my life, but I do wonder what life would have been like had I got diagnosed as a kid. It's something I always wonder. Anyway, I want to start things off here. We're going to hear stories from 4 self-advocates about how late diagnosis impacted their life. I want to start with Terry Robson. Terry, through your work with Awkward Spirit, how have you seen the realities and causes of late diagnosis change over the years?
Sorry. Thank you, Corey. One of these days I'll figure out how to do this unmute thing. Well, through my company, I've seen a lot of people getting diagnosed later in life. So it looks like the ASD numbers have increased tremendously. But I've found, since we've developed better diagnostic tools and since they've finally figured out sort of being the operative word in this sentence, how to diagnose women, the numbers are not getting higher. It just appears that way. So we have a lot of people who fell through the cracks when they were younger getting diagnosed. Now, I've known some people who are getting diagnosed close to the age of 60. I was diagnosed at age 33, just after the DSM-4 came out. So I've always referred to myself as an Aspie because that's what I've identified with for the last 27 years. However, that does not make me ableist because I am very well aware that having Asperger syndrome does not define who I am. I am Terry, and I have Asperger syndrome. It's a little bit of who I am. It's not all of me. So I respect the fact that other people want it to be, person-centered, and that's totally cool. But yeah, I think in a way, it's a huge relief for those people who finally get diagnosed as an adult. I know when I got my diagnosis, it was like the weight of the world was gone off my shoulders. Like you, I had a reason for doing some of the things that I did when I was growing up, and for some of the things that I'm still doing right now. And I can't imagine somebody at my age, because I'm 60 right now, all of a sudden receiving that diagnosis and living life without knowing what had been going on for me. I'm still amazed at some of the things that come out of my mouth every once in a while. It's like, born without a filter. It's like, oh, but every once in a while I catch a filter as it goes flying by, and I'll use it at this particular moment. But like I said, the relief and the understanding that you get as an adult when you finally receive that diagnosis, you finally like yourself. At least I did. I finally liked myself. And because of that, other people started to like me because I was comfortable who I was within my own body, within my own mind. So it's kind of like, it was an incredibly life-changing event. I'm so happy for the people that now get those diagnoses. I wish there were more psychiatrists and psychologists who understood what, autism spectrum disorders are, and especially the psychologists who are there to do the testing, because they're so far behind. Somebody yesterday was saying that they've got a 6-year-long waiting list in order to be able to do the assessment for an adult who may have Asperger syndrome. So a lot of people are doing like the self-diagnosis on, the different things that you can pull up on Google and the other things that you can pull up online. And then they start to look at some of their behaviors, which I've seen, when they come to presentations and they're watching me and they're reacting to what I do, and they're going, oh, I do that kind of thing. I've seen my students do that kind of thing. So I can see that people are reacting to what they see in me, even though a lot of my behaviors and stuff are not as pronounced as they used to be because I'm on a lot of medications. But one of the other things that I've really noticed is some of my audience makeup is different than it used to be. So I have more people who do have ASDs that come. They realize that they're not the only one in the world, so they become much more comfortable with who they are. It's like, I have this group of people that I can talk to, I can get answers from. So in a way, my company has become much more effective in getting that message across to people and helping them understand who it is that they are at this point in their life. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you, Terry. So I'm going to introduce Cindy now, who is going to talk a little bit about herself, and she's going to introduce the next speaker.
Thanks. I started by chatting about myself, so I'll just continue on. So my two younger children were both diagnosed at 20 years ago and 22 years ago. Both of them were very difficult to diagnose because neither of them fit the criteria at the time. My middle son actually had language and then lost his language by the age of 3. And so when he was diagnosed, the diagnostic team kept track of my youngest. But my youngest was super social and made eye contact, and he pointed and he spoke. But I had to film him in preschool with preschoolers because he wouldn't socially interact with kids his age, but he interacted super well with adults. And so he was very difficult. And so it took a long time because they didn't fit the norm. And 5 years ago, I had, so much like what Terry was saying, I started to hear about these women who were getting diagnosed later and later in life. And I went to see a panel, and like what Terry was saying, I went, oh my gosh, that's me, that's me, that's me. But it took me 5 years to sit with it. And so at the age of 57, I got a diagnosis of autism. And I fit the female phenotype of autism, but I don't fit the male phenotype of autism. And that's where the diagnostic tools sit. And so, as a mother, who watched her children struggle, I also, have had to struggle myself. And so I want to take the next question over to another mom, Male Ottman. And May, can you tell us about your journey in the world of diagnosis of autism?
Yes, of course. So my name is May. For me, I grew up back in Beirut in Lebanon at a time where almost no one has heard of autism and families are not familiar with it. So definitely there were no resources to support, and of course I wasn't given any support in that sense, but was more labeled kind of the difficult child and had to learn to work through a lot of my behaviors and regulate myself and stimming and things like that. I had to learn growing up how to kind of control it myself. And then growing up and coming here, that's when I had my son. And at that point, I still did not know much about autism. It was only when my son was diagnosed at the age of 2 that it's interesting for me because I went through the journey as someone who was not diagnosed. I didn't define myself even as an autistic person, so I didn't know I was autistic. So I went through that journey as an autism mom. So at that phase where I didn't know what autism is and I was panicking and, went through that journey. And then, understanding it more and starting to see similarities and starting to understand and talk to other, because for me it was very important to talk with autistic adults and autistic teenagers and kids and kind of understand their point of view versus just hearing, all the sadness and all that type of conversation that's going on. So through these conversations with other women that I started to see a lot of similarities and I got intrigued. Wait, I do that. I think like that. I did that as a kid because there's a lot of things that I kind of masked or have learned to not do. So it took me a while to kind of remember, yes, I did that. That's how I think. And then I went to get diagnosed. I went to a clinic where they specialize in women on the spectrum. And that's where I got diagnosed at the age of 32. So after my son, and then became, under that umbrella of an autistic person, raising an autistic child. And it became, and I definitely see it's very, very different journey. And for me as a mom, having lived through these two kind of journeys, I understand and feel with also parents who are not on the spectrum, raising children on the spectrum when they don't understand it. And I see the differences and where they are. But what I've learned about myself, a lot of things made sense at the time of diagnosis, like Terry kind of understood to love the things about me and learn to take care of my mental health, understand things about me and be kinder to myself, especially because we're prone, a lot of women on the spectrum are prone, to have depression and a lot of mental health issues. And that was the journey as well. That was what led me to getting diagnosis, that I was struggling with depression. And for me, I appreciate having done the diagnosis, and it helped me a lot in understanding myself and just be gentle with myself and understanding my how my social battery works, what I can and cannot do, what to avoid, what to do. So it definitely helps, and I encourage other women who are even thinking that they might be, or just to go through the process. It helps a lot, So I definitely recommend that, to get to know yourself better.
Thanks, May. That was very inspiring. Your journey was very similar to my journey.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the things that that what I'm hearing today and speaks to the lack of supports, regardless of what age you are, when you receive your diagnosis. And I think as someone who's been diagnosed later in life, trying to find somebody that can actually understand how my brain works and to help me with those filters. I mean, at 58 years old, I'm still trying to figure out, hey, I say what I think, and lots of people admire me for it, but lots of people, tell me that I'm too blunt or I'm too rude, and I don't see it. So, we need those supports even later in life to help us. Our next panelist is Tarra Carlson. And Tarra, my question to you is, what do you want the medical audience to know about autistic individuals going through menopause?
Well, that's a deep subject. In many ways, more than one, not to get off track. Menopause, I wrote something to keep myself kind of focused here because, well, it's kind of hard to walk and chew bubble gum at the same time for a good lot of us. I don't know, I've been tripping over my eye teeth for a long time. ADHD jokes, gotta love tiny nuts. Anyway, menopause and neurodivergent influences is the topic of my speech. Introduction of self. I was diagnosed with autism at 39 years of age. This was eye-opening to me. I felt like I lived my entire 39 years prior to in a masked world where pandering to social norms was time spent in vain. I fully understand why I felt the way I did, and certainly had ambiguity about how others treated or responded to me. This diagnosis brought a blanket of relief to me, and I felt happy to clear the pressures I had in my life about who I was. This led to me to learn who I was going to be. I no longer choose to mask myself or my emotions. I chose not to be complacent to social insecurities and presumed normalities. My voice would lead me through this newly revamped sense of self 12 years later, after learning more of who I am and who I was, and I now need to deal with the next phase of my life in transition of my gaining female body. I would like to discuss the aging aspects of neurodivergent women. My current journey has been in the realm of perimenopausal effects and having it get along with my diagnosis of ADHD and autism and social anxiety disorder. Some of the changes have been interesting. These changes have included excess sweating, cold and hot flashes, memory loss, and has supercharged my anxiety challenges. My brain has been living in a fog, and my mood swings have needed some definite governing. My body has been under new discovery on many physical and mental and emotional levels. As they say, the get up and go is got up and went. Most often, along with newfound effects of aches and pains as well. It has been exhausting for my body, and daily house tasks can feel like an attempt to climb mountains. However, I hope to find more motivation on these mountains. I have adopted a plethora of supplements, and as they also affect my ability to supplements, as they also affect my ability to walk, drive, sleep, or perform daily tasks. These tasks are aspects that have been typical in my life, however, not anymore. Retaining self and learning is changing model of self continues to be an adventure, another lovely surprise to all these ever-changing aspects of myself, who has been my increased struggles with insomnia. Why sleep when our bodies need it, right? Again, exhausting. As per my dynamic work life, I have needed to question my current resiliency, and my mind wants to go yet. My body tells me no. This continues to be a work in progress. So, yeah, along with other physical issues that go along with menopause, for which I will not discuss because the content is a little bit more colorful than I wish to get into. Having menopause and not having the right kind of education and having to teach myself is energy that I could have easily spent elsewhere, when there could have been a program that was person-centered for me to help educate me as to what's going on the physical and hormonal aspects of my disability. I would have been in a much better place, say in my 30s versus my 40s. I would have been prepared.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tara. That is awesome. And thank you for sharing your story with us.
I think it goes to show that clearly, if I may speak as a guy, the medical profession needs to be better informed about autism in females, because it's quite clear that the issues and challenges you guys face as women are quite different than those I face as a man. And it's not fair that you guys should be lumped in the same mold as me, because you're not the same. Everyone is different. So I want to segue into Terry one last time here. And Terry, you talked a lot about your story, and you talked a lot about the changes you've seen and what you'd like to see. I'd like to expand a little more on what you recommend for changes in regards to your work, and maybe in terms of, I guess, making life better for autistics so that they're not maybe diagnosed so late in life.
Was that to me or to someone else?
Terry.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks very much, Corey. I think one of the things that would help all of us, men and women, is if we get that national autism strategy going, because then there will be equity across all of Canada. We can, use the same testing models, because I think some of them are a bit different, but we need to make sure that the testing models we use for women are different than those for men. Because as you just said, Corey, why should we be lumped in with you? When we're so different. And unlike many of the young girls who mask and hide behind that facade that they have, and so they don't get diagnosed when they're in school, I was one of the ones who was a little bit more similar to the boys. I was the kid who was always yelling out the answer, or bopping around in my seat, or running around the classroom so they could see that there was something going on with me, but at that time nobody had a clue what it was. So the whole thing with the national autism strategy is then we get equity. Okay, and currently there's this huge disparity that exists from province to province, not only in the people who are available to test, but in the testing, the age of the people who are getting tested, and the cost is formidable for most people. I was lucky in that my psychiatrist recognized it in me. When he first told me I had Asperger syndrome, I honestly thought he said axe murder. And I'm like, I beg your pardon? I have what? So then, I did the research. I could have been, and I still think I could be the poster child. One of the other things I think that needs to become more equitable is the amount of money that those of us who live on disability get from province to province. I currently live in Alberta. So we get almost $1,700 a month. I had moved down to Ontario for a year and a half, and you get less than $1,200. In other provinces, it is even less. So we need to have that equity across the board, and I believe that national autism strategy will do that for everyone, because we all need the opportunity to live a good quality of life, and it's really hard to do that when you get like $1,200 a month or $1,700 a month if your rent is $850 or $900. And also some of the provinces don't provide very good drug coverage. So the national autism strategy will pull so much of that together for all of us, and we can really just work together and come together as a community to help support each other more than we already do. So CPPD, it needs to have I can't think of the word I want all of a sudden. It needs a cost of living increase every year. And also the disability tax credit should be carried on throughout life. So I could go on, but I'm not going to. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon, and I'll pass it back to Cindy.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for sharing your stories. This means an awful lot to me because at 57 years old, well, I'm 58, but at 57, I shouldn't have had to wait that long to get a diagnosis. And no woman should have to. No woman should have to wait till they're 20 or 25 or 32 or any other age. I think we're doing a disservice to all Canadian women, regardless of your age, by not having a diagnostic tool that really reflects the understanding of the female phenotype. There are men who are getting diagnosed late in life because they also represent more around the female phenotype than the male. We need to do better. We really, really do. And to all the medical people that are sitting here today listening and researchers, you need to be helping us because I get to live my life now starting at 58. And May gets to start her life at 32. And others, when they got it. I now know who I am, but I should not have had to wait. Nobody should have to wait this long if we don't fit the diagnostic tool stereotype of autism. I just want to thank you all for sharing your stories and being a part of my world while we got to know each other around this. It's been a blessing to know that I'm not alone. And so thank you. And thank you everybody for staying and listening, because being the last panel of the 2 days, I wasn't sure if anybody would stick around. So thank you all. It's been a real honor and a privilege to be part of this panel and to be part of this great 2-day leadership summit. So thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. That was very nice. Thank you for you and everyone who
Thanks a lot,
organized.
Cindy. Appreciate your candor and your honesty, and it's okay to cry. Because some.
Thank you.
So this wraps up our panel. I don't know if we have time for questions or if we're going on to the closing remarks. I'm not sure.
With apologies, Corey, we are at the 4:30 mark, so we do have to get into the closing remarks there. But this was tremendously informative, and thanks again to you, Corey Walker, and you, Cindy Gerlach, for a call to action. So thanks.